Shalom, this is Rabbi Klein from the Greater Miami Jewish Federation. A story is told of a man that has a business and has two employees. One employee had only worked for 10 years, and the other one had worked for 20 years. Now it was time for a big promotion in the company. And of course, the one that had been there for 20 years had expected to be promoted. But unexpectedly, the boss gave the job to the person that had been there only 10 years. Very angry, the person that had been there for a very long time walked into the office of his boss and said, I don't understand. I've been in this company for 20 years, while this other person here has only been there for 10 years. Yet you give him the promotion? The boss said, no, that's not the way it happened. What happened is you were in this office 1 year, 20 times in a row. This person had been here for 10 years. The story, of course, speaks to the fact that we always need to go deeper, we always need to develop, and we need to continually journey. And this is the central message, I think, in the book of Devarim, in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is called in rabbinic parlance Mishneh Torah, a review or a repeat of the Torah. Up to now, the book has really been focused on moral exhortation and religious exhortation, what we call tochacha. But from now for the next few parshiot, we are really going to be focusing on the mitzvot, on the various commandments that God wants us to keep in the land of Israel. Most of these mitzvot have already been said in other places. So why do we need to repeat that which has already been said in other places? I think partially because while the mitzvot may be exactly the same, the situation is radically different. Until now, these mitzvot have been said in the desert, in a womb-like existence, but now they are entering history, a real place and a real land. And so therefore, the mitzvot need to be reiterated because the point of going into the land of Israel is not just to be a bunch of righteous individuals in the desert, but to create a society, an ideal religious and righteous society. And so therefore, if you look at the mitzvot in the next upcoming parshiot, they all deal with the idea of social cohesion and also the idea of our responsibilities towards one another. It's the idea to create a cohesive society based upon the values of holiness and righteousness. It's a new time and therefore requires repetition. This week's parsha opens up with the following words: Re'eh, see, Anochi noten lachem bracha v'klala. I have placed before you today blessings and curses. In another formulation of this, in Devarim 30, or Deuteronomy 30, God says, I have placed before you blessings and life and curses and death, and therefore choose life. Well, why is this even a choice? Of course we want blessings in life and we don't want death. That's obvious. We don't want curses in our life. Why is this even a choice? However, if we really think about this, and I'd like you to think about this, while we want life and blessing, often actions that we take are extremely different. In science, we have an idea of entropy. Without a contravening force, without a certain force, all things move towards randomness and chaos. In the Torah, the same is true. If you think about the opening chapters of the book of Genesis, how does the world begin? The world was a formless void and darkness. And a great wind was blowing across the waters. And then God divides the sea from the sky, the land from the sea, and everything takes its form and takes its place. But the beginning of creation is all entropy. It's the same in interpersonal and communal life. How does one ensure blessing and curses? Through the observance of mitzvot. The Torah enjoins us that through the constant observance of the positive commandments, not only individually, but collectively, one can ensure blessing. They create a force in the social fabric of our communities. Conversely, if we continually violate the covenant and we worship other values, other idols, the result will be chaos, death, and curse. Very often people think The idea of reward and punishment is that God is punishing us if we do something wrong. But that's not really the idea of reward and punishment. It says in the Midrash, in Devarim Rabbah, it says the following. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Elazar says, when God said these words, I have placed before you blessings and curses. What does that mean? At this moment, I'm placing before you blessings and curses? Rabbi Elazar says, no. Ela me'alea hara'a ba'al oseh hara'a, ve'hatova ba'a al oseh hatova. No, it really means automatically evil will come for those who do evil, and good will come for those who do good. People don't see the value of their actions. Obviously, people want life and blessing, but they don't necessarily consider how to get there. People do things that are self-destructive. Positive actions in mitzvot create a social fabric, create a stable society, create a spiritual life, which ensures a sense of happiness. However, the violation, automatically those actions violate the social fabric, violate our society, and create, by their very nature, curse. People don't see the importance, therefore. At the end of last week's Parsha, the very last words, the Torah says, Ki im shamor tishmerun, et kol mitzvah zot. If you are proactive and observe all of the mitzvot. The Midrash says the following. The paragraph immediately before that is the second paragraph of the Shema, where it says, Vaya im shemoa tishmeu el mitzvotai. If you listen to the words that I have put before you today, to love God and to worship God. And right after it says these words, Ki im shamor tishmerun et kol mitzvah zot. If you observe all of these mitzvot. Isn't it saying the same thing the Midrash says? The Midrash says no. It's different because people can hear, but they can say, I've heard it and now I'm good. But it says, Ki im shamor tishmerun. It says not only do you have to listen to it, but you need to continue to internalize it. You need to listen to it and learn it again, the rabbis say, to repeat it, to observe it, to deepen that identification with what was being said in the Shema, that you should listen to all the mitzvot. Because there are people that are going to say, I listened to it once already. They're not going to go over it. They're not going to internalize it. People tend to sit on their laurels. So therefore, the verse says, Ki im tishmerun, and the Midrash shamor tishmerun, you shall observe it. And the Midrash says you need to yishneh, you should repeat it. The same word as Mishnah Torah. The rabbis continue, they say, you know what Torah is like? Torah is like a precious metal. It's very hard to acquire. You really need to seek it out. But they say once you have it, people that have a precious metal want to preserve it. But said once you have it, they say it's like glass, like a very delicate glass, which can be broken easily. So even if we have it, we can have it for one day, and the next day we forget everything we learned. We know the truth, but then the next day we delude ourselves into forgetting what we already know. And this is what the beginning of the Parsha says. Hey, I'm giving you this choice every single day. Hayom, today, you have to remember every day is a choice that we have to make because you can forget it. Even though we are good people, we can forget our values. The idea is we need to listen to the words of God and we need to repeat them every day. So we need to be vigilant and proactive. And for this reason, the opening mitzvot in our parsha are all about being vigilant, making sure that the center of our communities are intact and have a sense of righteousness and religiosity. The first thing that the parsha talks about is establishing a central place for us to come and worship in Jerusalem. Later, it's going to be identified as Jerusalem. Why can't you just worship wherever you'd like? Well, the fear is if you could worship wherever you like, perhaps some people are going to decide to worship other gods or worship in ways that the Torah considers morally reprehensible. The most egregious example is child sacrifice. So therefore, if you're going to worship, you need to go to a central place. You need to make sure that there is no idolatry throughout the land of Israel. And the Torah commands us to make sure there's no idolatry in the land of Israel. A very high order. They say to eliminate idolatrous towns. If there's a whole town, you need to do war. Very radical. False prophets and pernicious people that encourage idolatry. These are the very reasons why the Canaanite nations couldn't stay in the land of Israel, according to last week's Parsha, because they had immoral values. So all of these three mitzvot, which are in Hebrew called Mesit, Ir Hanidachat, and Nabi Sheker, the one who encourages others to do idolatry, the idolatrous town, and the false prophet, they compromise the blessings for everyone. The Torah tells us, Shamor Tishmerun, you need to internalize the mitzvot again and again. You need to be vigilant. However, the parshas that are coming up, it's not only about my individual obligations, but our collective obligations. Because one could say, what do I have to do with that idolatrous town over there? I have nothing to do with it. The answer is no. You are responsible for the collective if you as a community collectively choose blessings for the entire people. Now, is this really a concern for us today? Do we really have idolatry today? No, but we have other problems in the center of our communities. Throughout the desert, indeed, idolatry was a real problem. Think of the golden calf and think about other sins in the desert which had to do with idolatry. This may not be the same problem of our generation, but we have other values in the center of our camp that are problematic, where we don't take responsibility for one another. The most important one in my mind is right now, we're living in a time of extreme laissez-faire freedom. We raise the flag of freedom. Personal rights are always trumping personal responsibility for one another. Don't tread on me. This has become an idolatry of our day, where everyone can do what they want. Today, we don't have a Mesit. We don't have one who is encouraging us to worship foreign gods. But today we have other types of people. We have false prophets that are walking around in peddling all kinds of conspiracies and falsehoods which people are believing. These people are from popular media people to even individuals in the government. In a society which glorifies personal freedom at the expense of any other value, we allow these forms of false prophets to walk through our society, wreaking havoc on our society. They peddle lies and conspiracy. I can't think of anything more explicit than those peddling lies right now about vaccines. We know now people are literally dying now because of the disinformation. There are curses throughout our community. There are curses throughout our people because people are listening to lies and they're not becoming vaccinated to protect not only themselves, but those that are around them. There are top leaders that fail to condemn these individuals on state and federal levels. Make no mistake, this cult, and I call it a cult, of individual freedom without any discussion of our collective responsibilities to one another is causing untold sorrow. This is just one example, but there are many things that we need to be vigilant about and we need to battle that are in the middle of our camps that are problematic. Elul is a time that we are entering, the days before Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, a time for us to reevaluate our values, to build ourselves up. We are not just judged upon our past, but the future that we decide with one another. History is changing very quickly, and we are in a transition, just as the Jews are about to cross the Jordan. It's also time for all of us collectively, for a Mishnah Torah, to review and deepen our values. Our values are important, and they're a source of blessing not just for ourselves, but for all of the community. Wishing all Shabbat Shalom.